people think. It's not missing out on things, and I'm really happy.
Well, it'd be really interesting to hear some of the benefits and the things that the rewards that you find in a celibate lifestyle. Can you touch on that?
Oh gosh, where do I start? Well, first of all, it's spiritually rewarding because it is a gift, and as you go on, you realise it's a gift because of the many benefits it brings. The fact that I'm not at risk of sexually transmitted infections. I'm not going to get pregnant when I don't want to. And of course, with the pressures that young people have today, there are so many youngsters that are pressured into feeling like they've got to perform well, they've got to make sure they've got like the right knickers on and the right looks down below and up top and everything. Everything has to be 100% right. And, you know, there's none of that pressure for somebody that's celibate. So you've got your spiritual benefits, you've got your physical benefits in that you're not going to contract a nasty sexually transmitted infection. There's the social benefits, in fact, in so much as I've got many male friends as well as female friends, and the male friends that I've got know that I'm not going to pounce on them. And there's this sort of mutual respect going on whereby, you know, they know that they're not going to get anything sexual out of me, and in some ways that gives them more respect for you because obviously there's not like these hidden agendas going on, whereas like who's going to make the first move. If it's set out at the outset, then it doesn't cause that sort of friction and those problems and tensions.
That's wonderful. And in contrast to that, what would you say have been some of the challenges for this lifestyle?
I think probably one of the main challenges that a lot of celibate people have is that they are seen to be somewhat different or like alienated from the rest of the world in some way. When you're a teenager, it's easy, or well, it's not easy, but it's easier than when you're an adult celibate, because once you get to the age of 18 and over, people expect you to have done something, and if you tell somebody that you haven't, if you're asked, then people tend to sort of look at you as if to say, what, really? What, never? And that can create some tension in conversations, because sometimes people see you as a little bit strange, or if they haven't met you and you're talking over the phone, they think that you're either frigid or you're really ugly or you're just there's something wrong with you. And I think that that's something that we really have to change and turn around in our society, because there's celibates everywhere, but we don't get to talk about it, we don't get to hear about them, because everybody's talking about sex so much. And I've found that even in some churches, if I tell somebody that I'm celibate, they'll say, oh, there'll be somebody out there for you, don't worry. And so I'll say, but I don't want anybody, I'm fine the way that I am. And so then the conversation is like, oh, I'm sorry about that. And it's almost like they feel sorry for you rather than happy for you. And
that's interesting. So it's not actually recognised as a legitimate biblical choice. It's considered almost like that, you know, you're waiting for that special someone to come a bit later on.
Yes.
It's not really recognised, right? Well, I mean, it would be interesting then to actually touch on what the Bible has to say about it, because there is a lot that's been written in the New Testament about celibacy as a particular call that God gives to some people, and it is spoken in positive terms by both Paul and by Jesus himself. You've mentioned Corinthians. Are you able to point out to us some passages in Scripture which teach on this topic of celibacy?
I mean, I'm not very good at actually pointing out particular passages because my memory is excessive. But of course, you've got the passages that talk about being taken out and living a pure life, and the fact that celibacy is actually a calling. And St. Paul does say that if you're not burning with passion, then it's actually better to stay celibate than to be married. That's not to say that the celibate state is any better than the married state, because being married is also a gifting from God. But it's saying that if you can stay celibate, and if you've got that sort of either the low sex drive or you feel that you've got a gifting for it, then it's actually better to do that, because you can dedicate more time to God and godly endeavours than if you're constantly thinking about how to please your husband rather than how to please God.
Because actually there are some passages about that, aren't there, that if a man is single, Paul says that he would prefer for him to remain that way, and if there's a widow or a virgin, that he would prefer for her to remain that way. And he makes the point that you're making, that when a person is single, they don't have that divided interest because their loyalty and their focus is unhindered, because that they can concentrate on serving God and serving the kingdom. Whereas when people become married, there's obviously there's still that heart towards God, but also the concern for the spouse as well. So I did remember that when you mentioned it. Yeah. Okay, so it's interesting what you said, though, that basically marriage and celibacy are equally calls. So one is neither inferior or superior. They're both unique calls that God gives each individual person. Are you able to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of churches do tend to focus on marriage. And if they're focusing on celibacy, it's always with a view to waiting for marriage. And there's a whole thing, particularly in the States at the moment, about waiting for marriage, which is a great thing. And that philosophy is much better than actually go out there and do it when you're ready. But at the same time, that emphasis on waiting is actually making people that are called to celibacy feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. The secular world is telling them to go out and do it when you're ready, at any time, in any place, and with whoever. And then you've got a lot of the churches saying, you must wait and wait for marriage. But where does that leave people, not necessarily that are called to celibacy, but people that are maybe thinking of getting married but never actually find the right person in their life, or they've got these great hopes and dreams and they're being told, wait for marriage. What about if that waiting never ends? And the way I see it is that instead of focusing on the past and our past regrets about sex, and instead of focusing on the future, like waiting for marriage, let's focus on the here and now. And if somebody is celibate or wanting to remain chaste, then why not focus on them as a person now, as a whole person, and not look to the future or look to the past, but bring together celibates, like build them up and create a whole network of people that know that they're not alone.
Now, God's actually given you personally a vision for this, and 2 years ago you founded an organisation in the UK called Celibrate. Are you able to give us some background about how Celibrate came to be, about the vision that God gave, and also just give us an idea of the sort of general aims and objectives of the organisation?
Yeah, Celibrate came about, it was planted as a seed in my head about 10 years ago, and I've just been so busy doing a degree and doing different things in my life that I didn't have the time and the commitment to focus on establishing an organisation. And every year I would feel like God's calling, and my heart was quite heavy, saying, you've got to do this. And it was like, why me, God? Why me? It's like so controversial in this country. But at the same time, I felt quite excited about it. And it was like I was passionate about this dream and this calling. But it would have cost so much money to set up the website, to get all the brochures printed, and to actually go out there and promote this message alongside like conventional work that pays the bills. And just by almost like a miracle, I met the right people at the right time 2 years ago that enabled it to all come into being. And now we have a website, we have little cards that we give out, and brochures and things. And we've brought together a whole multitude of celibates from a very young age, right up until, people that are widows and widowers, that are joining and saying, we're adapting to a life of celibacy, really. And we now have around 5,000 people that have subscribed via the website and in 2 years. So, it's really doing great things, and more than what I envisaged when I first set the organisation up.
That's wonderful. And so what are some of the kind of support that people find who become members of Celibrate?
We have, I thought that most members would actually come to us and say that they're celibate and they just want local support groups, which is what we're finding. But we're also finding that people are approaching us, young people in particular, that are just getting into the first dating stage, and they're just going out with someone. They want to know how far to go, what does it mean to remain chaste, what sort of things can you do, can't you do, how long will it take before they get married, how can